Hello, we're continuing our broadcasts from Kyiv, and we're very happy to have Arty Green with us today. Arty, hello, thank you so much for finding the time to speak with us today. We're very happy to see you. Good afternoon, Zayma.
Thank you, Arty. You know, it's a challenging day today. We, of course, and I had other topics planned for today's conversation. But I'll have to start with Pokrovsk, because today, according to information from the 7th Corps of the former Rapid Reaction Airborne Assault Troops of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, according to their information, the enemy has deployed approximately 11,000 troops to encircle the Pokrovsk agglomeration. Overall, in the area of responsibility of the armed forces, Russia has amassed approximately 27,000 troops, 100 tanks, up to 260 infantry fighting vehicles, and up to 160 guns. And a photo has surfaced of Russia flying its flag on the Pokrovsk steel. Arty, I'm sure you've been to Pokrovsk more than once. I recently read, even this week, how our soldiers are writing about Pokrovsk. I would even say with a certain tenderness. They recall drinking coffee in this town, how they interacted with the locals, how painful it is to feel all of this now. But what they wrote, that was a few days ago. If possible, Arty, let's talk a little about Pokrovsk. What do you remember about Pokrovsk? Your feelings, what is the current situation, and how do you assess what's happening at the front?
Well, yes, I remember from 1914, when a sacrificial black Lenin stood there and everyone took photos next to him. Well, the last time I was in Pokrovsk was a year ago, somewhere in September, I think. Well, it was a frontline town, but one that was vibrant and alive. I remember those municipal workers planting flower beds there. That is, it was quite a common meeting point for us, those on different fronts, but our comrades, since, let's say, 14-15, we often arranged meetings at this supermarket, or rather, in the shopping center. There was a cafe there, everything was there. I mean, well, it looked cozy. And it was such a convenient meeting point. Those on the southern front, and those north of Pokrovsk. Pokrovsk was a convenient crossing point, and the highway to the Dnieper began there. So, the most convenient way to get to the Dnieper, or to southern Ukraine, was through, well, not exactly through Pokrovsk, but through Grishina. But if you wanted to meet someone, then, and who was nearby in those areas, then yes, Pokrovsk was a convenient place. So, well, the main bypass road was Pokrovsk, Konstantinovka. Well, they cut it off, somewhere around 7 months ago, the enemy cut it off. Well, first they took it under fire control, and then they stopped driving. They were driving deeper, right there where the Shaw is, right along this bypass through Dobrapol. There, and then they cut it off. Well, that is, they're crawling right now. So it turns out that in about a year, when I left a year ago, we no longer drove along the Pokrovsk, Konstakha highway. It hadn't been physically cut off yet, but it was already under enemy fire control, so it was safer and more correct to go around through Dobroka. Well, if you go to Druzhkovka, then turn onto Shakova and onto Druzhkovka. And if you go to what's it called, Kramatorsk, there's a direct highway there, very well done. Somewhere back in, I think it was in 15 or later, they slightly improved, the only good road in the Donbass. That was the Mariupol-Kramatorsk highway. Well there you go. And between Pokrovskoye and Konstanka, by the way, there was this tank training ground, a concrete road. That's why we went around through this Dobroplast. There you go, but never mind, that's just mere ranting. So, what do we have today? The enemy managed to push through the Pokrovsko-Menogradsky defense area on the flanks. That is, more specifically, Pokrovskaya, even, let's say, southwest of Pokrovsk and in the Rodinskoye area northwest of Pokrovskaya. Southwest, that's where the mines are. I forgot the geographical names, that is, after Pokrovskoye, the next village. And that, well, represented a serious burden. How did I forget that village on KE? It changed hands several times. That is, our forces managed to stabilize, that southern Pokrovskaya, about 5 kilometers there, stabilize the situation, The enemy never took the mine, and the mine is a structure that dominates the area. Therefore, if we had lost that mine, the enemy would have definitely taken tight control of the exit from Pokrovsk. So, well, our forces are holding there, but, you see, the enemy found another weakness and entered, advancing directly into Pokrovsk from the south. And, let's say, according to all the maps, this is no longer a sabotage and reconnaissance group. That is, our forces even announced that there are 250 enemy attack aircraft in this southern zone, which is already a full-fledged attack battalion. This is a serious force. Especially considering that this is an urban area, especially the southern part, an industrial zone. That means there is room to hide. It won't be so easy to dislodge them. For some reason, our command announced that they are deploying GER special forces there. Well, apparently, to carry out combat missions within this densely populated area, to counter these attack aircraft groups. Well, I don't think such things need to be announced. It's clear that we're countering it somehow, but we've announced it, so we can repeat it. Well, let's say the enemy has now reached the railroad level, I repeat, according to all the maps. So, this isn't my information. I don't have any close comrades or friends with whom I could verify this at this specific point. If I did, I wouldn't be this source of information. I'm simply repeating what's available in open sources. And this is already a very serious threat, since there are only 6 kilometers left to the enemy position. There's a mine there not far from Rodinskoye, just east of Rodinskoye. It dominates the landscape. There are also fairly tall structures on it that could be used to install antennas and observation devices. And it's an industrial area, after all, so it's difficult to disrupt everything there. Therefore, the enemy has a real physical ability to control the exits from, Pokrovsk. The width of the passage, if you take it by air, is about 6 kilometers. Of the roads I know, there's only one. Paved one. And they've probably already made some dirt roads there. For exit. It's unlikely they're using our one road, but nevertheless, it's all in a narrow corridor, which can only be used in conditions where visibility is poor. That is, dense fog or heavy rain. Specifically, dense rain, because light rain is no obstacle for a drone. The radio signal works worse, but, as far as I understand, fiber optics, well, they seem to work effectively. So, therefore, well, visibility is a little worse, but nevertheless, they recently broadcast, the enemy saw how they operate. In rainy conditions. So, you see, not every rain is protection. But thermal imagers don't work, so at night and rain, it will be effective. So, roughly speaking, logistics are covered completely. We need to choose specific weather conditions that allow us to enter, exit, deliver, or evacuate something from the area. It's difficult to defend our rather large force, which is located inside Tobrovsky, Mirnorod. Let's call it the Ukrainian Defense Force, in such conditions. Therefore, I believe, based on the amount of information I have, mostly from open sources, that it's probably time to leave access there, because defending in such difficult conditions is impossible. Our number of unjustified losses is growing. There's no operational space beyond Pokrovsk, and there can't be any. It's a different war now. We need to move to a different defensive line. Well, I hope the command will make such a timely decision. The only thing is, the battle is still going on right now, the Zarodinskoye area, well, the Dobropolskoye direction, yes, and Rodinskaya is also located there, sort of in the same bush. That is, if we manage to drive the enemy out of Rendezvous and out of the mine, I've forgotten the name of the mine, which, I repeat, is right behind Rendezvous, then, well, the corridor will widen. If this doesn't happen, or if our command deems it inadvisable to waste resources on such an attack, that could very well happen, because the enemy also understands the importance of this key position and will do everything to keep it from us. Well, in that case, we need to hold on, that is, stand firm in Pokrovsk. And under these conditions, our forces can, well, not indefinitely, but for a very long time, and yet suffer losses that we absolutely cannot afford in a war of attrition. Overall, I believe the time has come to abandon this defensive line. As for when the command will make that decision, I don't know. They may never make such a decision. This has happened many times, when tactical commanders, with their decisions, have extricated people from, let's say, completely hopeless situations. It's like we did in Debaltseve in February 15. Well, I can name a lot of places where we went out without orders, simply because there was no way to deliver supplies or evacuate them. And, unfortunately, when they got to the point where it was no longer possible to retreat with the wounded, they abandoned the raw. God forbid it happens again. So I would like such a decision to be made in a timely manner. While such a possibility remains, I repeat, we need to take advantage of the weather. It's autumn now, so it's already late autumn, so we have weather forecasts, we can watch them and make decisions. So, for now, let's say, such a possibility exists. The Russians are shouting about closing the ring. No, it's not a ring, they've taken control of the logistics. In other words, in the rear of this fortified area there's a kill zone, not a tactical rear, as it should be. In other words, defending oneself in such conditions is absolutely impossible. Especially if the country is waging a war of attrition. That is, we need to think about tomorrow and next year. We have no right to lose people. We don't have many of them anyway. At the very least, the enemy has a huge advantage in terms of personnel. And they spend them like, well, as if they don't care, yes, but that's no reason for our generals to follow their example. Well, that's the situation, a difficult one. I repeat, our troops can remain there for quite a long time, but I believe defending that line under these conditions is categorically wrong. And if you like, I urge the commanders there, if they hear the retired captain's opinion, to make the right decision.
Artyom, if we leave Pokrovsk, how will that affect the overall military situation in Donbass? Will it have any consequences or not? Will it, say, open up a path somewhere or, on the contrary, create some problems? Or, conversely, will we retreat to pre-prepared, as they used to say, yes, classic defensive lines, and conversely, will this somehow help us consolidate our position on certain, as you said earlier, heights and beyond? So, how do you understand this?
You know, if we don't withdraw, then we'll lose the complement of troops that are inside, or, let's say, we'll start losing them at such a rate that we'll lose them entirely. That's bad. Unfortunately, I know of dozens of such cases, in which I personally participated in one scenario or another, when the command either arrived very late or didn't arrive at all, and people retreated chaotically, units losing their combat capability and physically unable to occupy the next line. A proper retreat is when, having lost its combat capability, the unit retreats to more favorable lines. But if this unit is reduced to an extreme degree of loss of combat capability, it is unable to stop and hold the defense at the next line. In that case, we need to find a different set of troops to form a defensive line behind them. Starting with Avdiivka, there were at least 5 of these mistakes, maybe more, with the loss of subsequent defensive lines, because the enemy advanced on a fairly broad front after we lost Adeka. So, they often led to this. Not a step back, not a step back, not a step back. The unit completely loses its combat effectiveness. And when the tactical commander on the spot makes the decision to withdraw in order to save the remaining men, that unit is no longer capable of taking up defense at the next line. I saw this in Popasna. There was a very good defensive line right behind Popasna, prepared back in 1917. I'm talking about the spring of 22. And right before my eyes, the team was turning Popasna into a pile of construction debris with FABs. Back then, there were no cabs. With complete impunity. So, we saw these planes, and I determined the range for them based on the mine's impact time and angle relative to the horizon. Well, I mean, it was brazen. They would come in threes, drop mines, iron them out, and destroy the dangerous ones. So, my dear 24th Brigade was exhausted there to such an extent that it couldn't take up defense at the next line. And the next line was much more convenient than the Popasna itself. I flew my planes from these lines. So, it turns out that those were immediately behind the post for several kilometers. Here's one example. Kambrick didn't have the authority to make the decision to move to other lines. And neither the general staff, nor the commander at the time, Zaluzhny, made such decisions. There are dozens of such cases in this war. I really wouldn't want this to happen again in Popasna. Oh, I mean,
In Pokrovsk.
in Pokrovsk. That's the story, yes. The enemy is also suffering losses there. Enormous losses, probably more than. But we have no right to lose so many people. We need them for a long time. The war can last a long time, and it's not that we need them. We haven't collected biological trash to kill other people for money. These are defenders of their homeland. The value of their lives is an order of magnitude higher, 3 orders of magnitude higher, than the value of mercenaries and the enemy. They knew what they were signing up for, so to speak, and what they were signing up for. That's their problem. But we have a different story. And the value of a fighter here is not 1 to 1, not 1 to 5, not even 1 to 10 for the country, for society, for nations. Therefore, we need to make the right decision. These kilometers or this fortified area itself is no longer a key position because it is surrounded on 3 sides. Therefore, there is no point in holding it. Only so that politicians can say that Pokrovsk is still ours. There is no other meaning. But the point of setting it up is to, quantitatively reduce our losses per unit of time, because it's inconvenient there. Well, like in the Kursk operation, the last, final part, when we suffered greater losses due to logistics than on the line of contact. Well, that moment has arrived. We need to make the right decision. Arty, in Debaltseve, made the decision. Kambrick 128 in Shatala. Well, he made it under pressure from us, the officers there. We demanded it, knowing that command had left us there deliberately in this encirclement, so there would be no order to retreat. We, the officers, let's say, of the Debaltseve garrison, demanded that Sheptala make the decision to lead the retreat, because the sector commander had no intention of making such a decision. He sat there and acted out a film of Marshal Pavlov's in Stalingrad, waiting there for hot tea and Russian joy. So, here too, some officer must make such a decision if the command, for some political reason, does not accept it. I think so. But I'm not there. The people who are there must make the decision. Well, according to the modern laws of modern armies, all decisions are made by the commander on the ground, and not somewhere in the supreme headquarters. This is according to the canons of NATO. When averagely. According to the canons, yes, of armies in which the law of ethics and Western values are observed. No general from above can order someone to do something, stay there and die. No, well, as one of my American officers, who has become a friend, says, but sometimes in a very honorable sense. And in fact, this is the law of military ethics. That is, an officer, a commander on the battlefield, who is inside there with his units, has the right to make the decision to withdraw, and no one can force this on him. This is in countries that, let's say, have a different value system, they can. Here, we're basically fighting for values, not territory. Therefore, I think our army needs a serious, let's say, transformation, primarily in ethical terms. And then we won't have the many difficulties we've had. I'll repeat myself about this war. And Pokrovsk is currently facing a dilemma. I believe that holding this defensive area at the moment is not only inadvisable, but also very harmful. Something like that. For Putin, Donbass, and we've discussed this before, by the way, has always been a thorn in his side. And what he's always demanded is that we hand over this Donbass, which has been uncaptured since 2014 for 11 years. Something he can't capture, right? Something he dreamed of capturing but can't capture. So, what will the situation look like now if we retreat from Pokrovsk? What will the situation in Donbass look like? What else do we have left? How fortified are these areas? How well can we dig in there, so to speak? But I've heard more than once, Perhaps this is just superficial, yes, a journalistic view, that supposedly there are very well fortified areas in Donbass. We've also talked about this, yes, and it will be difficult for the enemy to advance there. But in Dnipropetrovsk, in the Dnipropetrovsk region, where the enemy is also currently advancing, there is danger there because there are operational spaces there that the enemy can exploit. Well, that's kind of a generalization. But what does the situation actually look like? Well, that's nonsense about operational space. The fewer, so to speak, buildings, structures, and other opportunities for cover, the more impassable such territory is in a modern war. The easiest places to advance are where there's a lot of green space, forests with dense undergrowth, and, well, let's say, a fair amount of, well, built-up areas. Yes, like in Donbass. Mines, ventilation shafts, those are separate, so the mines aren't just one place, but at least 5 or 6 facilities. And they're all built according to industrial principles. That means there's usually room for them to hide, accumulate, and then move on. The more facilities there are like that, the harder it is to hold a ragged line in conditions where the enemy has superior manpower and isn't attacking that manpower at all. So, the tactics the Russians are using now, they've figured it out intimately, gives them some kind of geographical advantage. In Donbass, yes, that tactic works. But, beyond Pokrovsk, the steppe fields begin, essentially a steppe zone. The terrain there is absolutely flat. Well, the plantings there aren't as sparse as in the south, like further south. They're denser, but they're just plantings there, and kilometer-long fields. Plantings, kilometer-long fields. A planting is a narrow space, meaning you can advance through it, it can be mined, it can ultimately be mowed down. That's the right way to mow down plantings and create bare kill zones. Unfortunately, we very rarely follow this rule. For example, during this war, I cut down hundreds of trees there that were blocking the radio horizon of my antenna. And I see with Posheriad that they're not preparing defensive lines. They really need to cut down the plantings, so the enemy has nowhere to gain a foothold. So, let's say along the line of the plantings there, yes, but across them, well, some are needed, some need to be left, and some lines need to be prepared. Well, not cut it down so as not to harm ourselves, yes, but so that the enemy couldn't get close. That's necessary. For example, there, north of Kapinsk, if at some point, before the enemy set up a base there on the right bank of the Oskovo, if they had made a fortification there, like that, from the settlement there into the forest, well, mowed it down a kilometer, it probably would have been harder for them to infiltrate the city. But they didn't do it in time, and the enemy took advantage of it. Moreover, if they had mowed it down, maybe the enemy wouldn't have even tried, because they would have seen the opportunity. And so they saw the opportunity. That's it. That is to say, unfortunately, because we had this brigade system and the brigades were personally locked into the Glaco through some bodies, temporary command bodies, no one thought about the long-term prospects of conducting military operations, that is, no one prepared the desired defense in the operational depths. Nowhere. Moreover, paradoxically, these commanders weren't even aware of the existence of the defensive fortifications built back in 1916-1917. And some of these lines there were actually built very competently, unlike those dug up in the middle of fields in recent years, haphazardly, wherever someone drew them on a map without seeing the terrain, and there you have it. That's a pit dug into the ground, billions of dollars worth of it, not just a completely useless structure, an excavation. Sometimes they were even harmful, creating difficulties for us to move, while the enemy could run up there, jump in, and hide. So there you have it. Well, never mind that, we've already gone over that, as they say. Basically, there's no operational space there. That's one thing. But as for the Donetsk region, beyond Pokrovsk, well, almost immediately Grishina, and then the next town, that's already, as far as I remember, Dnipropetrovsk region. But these are administrative boundaries, who cares? So, the next major settlement there is the border zone, but it's a little more restrictive. Well, basically, yes, the border zone is Dnipropetrovsk Oblast. A major city is Pavlorod. It's almost a 100-something kilometer drive from there, I don't remember, probably. There are fields there, and they'll be advancing for a very long time, because it's easier to create a coal zone in fields than in such difficult terrain with such industrial sprawl, like in the area of Pokrovsk and Mirnorod. So we won't lose anything. This is all nonsense. And Boltoronia, whoever says, oh, we have something like an operational zone there. That's heresy in modern warfare. It's the opposite, an impassable zone. Why isn't anything moving in the south? Because there's a 20-kilometer coal zone there, and we control it very effectively. Well, they overslept. There are reasons, subjective reasons. They overslept one of the defensive lines there in the Dnieper direction. They lost Kamenskoye. How could anyone forget Kamenskoye? Well, they moved on to the next one. And they're still holding it. And further on, there are the Nutwoods, those Sherbakis, and so on. There, it's all plantations and fields. Plantations and fields. It's a kind of synergistic mismatch. It's impassable in modern warfare. It's fairly easy to control. And now, every reputable platoon has its own FPV camera, at the very least. Well, that's it, that's good. I think the time has come to abandon this line, because defending it is categorically unprofitable. So, it's worthy. It can be defended, but the price for defending it is unjustifiably high.
Arty, I want to return to the kill zone topic, because our viewers remember how much we've talked about it, but now it's clear that the enemy is using this tactic of infiltrating in small groups. And it's an old tactic, yes, dating back to, I think, the First World War. But the point is different. So, if the kill zone exists, why is the enemy able to use this tactic of infiltrating? Either the kill zone isn't dense enough, or it doesn't exist somewhere, or the kill zone doesn't help in this case. How does it work? Or, as you just gave a good example, somewhere where there's open space, you can see everything, work more effectively. And immediately in this context, if the leaves fall, a very simple, pragmatic question. The leaves will fall now, well, it will be easier to see, right? So, will that improve the purpose of the kill zone? I don't know.
Well, the leaves also depend on the undergrowth, right? So, there are some plantings where there are just bare trunks and some treetops, right? And the planting itself, has no undergrowth or bushes. Yeah, those would be transparent. Let's say a pine forest is transparent in winter. Why? Because a thermal imager works effectively in winter. Exactly, but it's more transparent not from an angle, but from above.
Yeah.
You see? So, with a panorama, well, you won't see anything special there. You need to fly there, and, but if these are fields and plantings, you need someone monitoring the planting at every kilometer, and not all this stuff with this broken terrain, with some industrial buildings, substations, transformer boxes, and other small settlements. Not even settlements, well, roughly speaking, a group of houses, 5 of them. It's like between, say, Konstanna and Pokrovsk, there are a bunch of settlements there. No, there aren't that many between Konstanna and Pokrovsk, but between Bakhmut and Konstanna, there are these clusters of villages. That is, this village has a kind of curly shape, because there are 5 houses here, 10 houses there, 3 houses there, and it's all somehow spread out over this entire area. So, it's easy to infiltrate through such an area because you have to control it closely. Well, roughly speaking, the field of view of one observer or one drone is constricted by some very narrow space, and you need a very high drone density to make infiltration impossible, yes, or a high density of combat formations, which we can't afford. We don't have that many people. If we did, our generals would definitely launch some kind of offensive, and we would be outnumbered again. Yeah, it's tough to hold there. For example, my guys from the 24th Brigade have been holding the line in the Chasma for over a year now. The terrain there is difficult, but that's the 24th Brigade. It's a powerful brigade, with plenty of reconnaissance and reconnaissance capabilities. There, you see, they're really stuck. That is, the Chasma itself, or rather its ruined remains, have turned into a killer. But by the way, there are quite a lot of forests there, and they have dense undergrowth there, so there's plenty of room to climb. But, you see, they're stuck there. Well, there was this, well, roughly speaking, even a joke there, when the 98th Brigade, that is, the Russian Airborne Division, Ivanausk-Kostroma, their Ryazan, Ivanausk-Kostroma-Ryazan, some division there, various regiments in different populated areas and cities, found people quartered there. I think they lost 2 infantry units there this year. Well, headquarters, of course, don't suffer losses that often, but they lost, by our reckoning, 2 infantry units this year. And they were sent there to catch their breath, so to speak, to Tyaplinsky there, to this, what's it called, Dnieper group. They sent the 70th Division from there to take their place. And when the 70th Division tried to take those positions that were marked on the map, what's it called, they went for broke. My guys told me, these deaf-mute guys are just rushing forward, not like they're attacking, but just heading somewhere. I immediately said, probably rotation. Well, these idiots are just heading for a position they think is theirs. That's it. Well, that's how it was. But our guys quickly explained to them where their real position was. And there, as far as I know, there was a scandal there in the command between those divisions about these fake divisions, deceiving the command, shaking them down. And those mighty paratroopers got a good scolding. For that. They said there that I took the watch. So where did he get it? He took a kills. Something like that. But the Southern Theater of Military Operations, there are fields, yes, there are, on average, 15 to 2 kilometers between the landings, and you keep that landing under control. That is, well, let's say, well, it would be logical if they prepared in advance, yes, to make some cuts, that is, to mow down part of the planting, so that there would be a 500-meter section there, completely bald. And all that. And it is possible to mine, right? I mean, remote mining is now used quite often and quite effectively. There, and for everything else, one Mavic covers panoramas 10 kilometers to the right, 10 kilometers to the left. We just need to take control of these 3 plantings in this 10 km strip, so that no one infiltrates through them. And if they infiltrated, then they would run into ours somewhere or into mines, into minefields. Well, and somewhere, accordingly, into our infantry. But the enemy must not know how far along this planting our infantry is located. Otherwise, they will inevitably launch an attack there and plow everything up. That is, in modern warfare, the main defense is camouflage. That is, if the enemy has spotted you, change your position immediately, because they'll find a means of destruction that will force you out of any dugout. 3 or 8 units won't protect you from a bore, and even 3 or 3 tiers won't protect you. Therefore, if your position is spotted, withdraw immediately. And every battle formation located in the kill zone, and that's the kill zone, is forced to hide, because anything that doesn't hide dies. There must be a backup position, and not just one. That is, if you are spotted, you must have a maneuver planned out, where and how to retreat, so as not to burn it down when you approach that position. That is, it's a maneuver that doesn't require planning. If it doesn't, then these people are under pressure. If they are ever spotted, it's unlikely anything will save them, if it's all in the kill zone. Well, the chapel and its surroundings are that very kill zone.
Arty, in these conditions, when they're infiltrating in small groups, when everything is under surveillance, you can see everything, or not everything, but what's this possible, right? How does the significance of fortifications or fortified areas like this change? How does it change the situation or not? Well, in other words, traditionally, we used to talk a lot about how a fortification here and there wasn't completed, or wasn't done there, or there were some problems there. Lately, I haven't heard this topic at all. Either we've built fortifications everywhere, or the fortifications are no longer so valuable, or, well, there's some other problem. But I've simply stopped hearing this as an important, key topic, which has been floating around in the information space for a very long time.
I just said, well, look, this is also official information, which I didn't voice, but I'll simply repeat it. So, in one of the specific days, the enemy dropped 150 cavalry on the Pokrovsk-Mernogograd defense area. The minimum cap is a 250 kilogram bomb. Its destructive power is such that it would destroy almost any nuclear bomb shelter, because they aren't designed to withstand a direct hit from such bombs. They're designed for much lesser impacts. A bomb like that would destroy 2 entrances of a 9-story dock. And it could hit practically anywhere in that building. It would collapse, no matter what. It could hit the roof, or the basement. It's enough to destroy 2 entrances. So, 150 bombs. Moreover, the first ones wouldn't hit anything at all. So, according to my estimates, their aiming range was, well, 500 meters. The average deviation from the target point, as I understand it. So, they could hit the city, but not a specific target. But times are changing. Now it's starting to hit, at least very close. That's why I just laid out the rules 3 minutes ago. If you've been spotted, move immediately. In this war, in its current state, you can't stay in a position when the enemy knows you're there. If you're more than just a soldier with a single machine gun, then maybe they won't send airstrikes on you. Even a soldier with a machine gun should move too. And he should have a clear maneuver plan for where to move and when. That is, there should be some kind of trench line or some kind of passages between buildings, so he can do it covertly, not under Mavic, who can see him there, yes, but have the ability to move covertly, even to the point of having covered gaps, covered. Trench lines, through which you can move from one point to another, so as not to be seen from above. The Russians, by the way, built all this. They built it right before our eyes. We were stationed in Terezhik, New York, and they erected these massive structures. They had 2 lines of trench fire, not just 1, but 2, covered from above. They could move personnel along these trenches horizontally over any distance. I've never seen anything like that anywhere. And in general, I've never seen the defensive fortifications the enemy is building anywhere near that quality, and I don't see them now. We have extremely poor command quality, because these proper fortifications. I saw some excellent fortifications at the Kherson-Borislav bridgehead, which was defended, essentially, by a group of paratroopers there, along with other units, led by the commanders of the Russian airborne forces. I saw some excellent defensive fortifications and heard the defense being organized. Frankly, no one here knows how to defend themselves as well as 3 airborne divisions, led by their commander, did back then. That's why we broke our teeth on them, despite having moral and numerical superiority. If they hadn't allowed us to destroy the bridges, like the Kokovsky Bridge and the Antonovsky Bridge, we wouldn't have taken Kherson-Borislav. We wouldn't have been able to take Borislav. The only thing that helped us do this was that we disrupted their logistics, and their artillery practically ceased firing. That is, they fired 10 times less. They did have shells, but they couldn't deliver them to the right bank. And only thanks to this, we, casually began to destroy them along the entire depth of our artillery. And earlier, he fired 3 shots there. We need to move quickly, because 50 are already flying here, shot down. That's the story. Our command, unfortunately, I've never seen such proper fortifications anywhere as I saw them in Russia. And not only at the Kherson-Borislav Plaza. This is a question of the quality of the team. Because this is the commander's responsibility, it's the commander's knowledge. He must know how to do it, what needs to be done. Well, I'll give you a good example from ours, yes. In Debaltsevo, our 25th Kievan Rus battalion was holding the line on the northern Faseltsevo salient. From the air, our platoon's strongpoint looked like a battalion fortification area. I'm talking about the number of dug trenches, simulated dugouts, and the trash scattered everywhere. That is, using aerial reconnaissance, the enemy, or space, the enemy, let's say, couldn't figure out where those 30 men were, because we dug up false positions there, so that from above they looked like 600 men were there. But where exactly are those 30? Where are the real firing positions? There are anti-tank missiles, there are burned out anti-aircraft machine guns, and there's infantry. It wasn't visible from above, because if they had, they'd have plowed it up. Literally, the next position wasn't ours anymore, but another brigade's. I won't say which one. Many people know what I'm talking about. It was 50 by 150 meters. It's an ideal target for artillery. And naturally, there were losses. But at that position I mentioned, the Ghost Brigade repelled the assault, suffering only one loss. The assault, by the way, lasted 3 days, so they suffered only one loss. One soldier slipped while jumping from one position to another and twisted his arm. But this quality of command, yes, in our battalion it was high quality. In the Dobrovolchevsky Kievan Rus battalion, which was so overlooked by career officers of the Ukrainian army, like, well, it's a gang, like, these volunteers. But there was a career brigade there, which picked a company commander, well, a company commander, yes, a platoon commander, more, because there were 40 men there, well, more than a platoon. Well, a reinforced platoon, so to speak. It was ideal from an artillery standpoint. 150 versus 50, 50 deep, 150 front. If I were the D-30 battery commander, I would have killed everyone there. Well, if I were given 200 scenarios. But thank God, the Russian artillery had degraded to such an extent that they couldn't even get there. But we, too, were preventing any kind of integrity with counterbacterial warfare. In short, hug and cry. I really don't know. The
party. Well, and another important issue that we also discussed, and it would be good to return to it. Remember, there was a moment when many were waiting for Trump to somehow reach an agreement with Putin to stop the war. This was associated with both a lot of expectations and a lot of different reactions. In the media, there was a lot of discussion about how the negotiations Trump was conducting were a betrayal of many of them, including allies and everything else. And yet, stopping the war still seemed, well, more or less tangible, yes. Now the situation looks a little different. It's clear that Trump, well, if I use the word, has fallen out, yes, with Putin, and this is felt, at least in the public space. So, does this mean that we are now expecting a temporary escalation, with Putin trying to seize what he wants to seize, and perhaps only after some time will it be possible to return to this topic, or, in principle, this topic is off the table for the near future? That's exactly how you understand it, from your perspective.
Well, I see it this way. When Trump came to power, yes, he didn't have this power right away. It's some kind of appointment of his people, right? That is, it takes months. These people are starting to figure out what's going on the ground. If we take the specific case of the army, yes, the generals appointed by Biden, some of them were gender-diverse generals in the U.S. Army. That is, well, to put it mildly, Trump couldn't afford to trust the opinions of officers and generals he didn't know personally, and who, well, roughly speaking, would call in foreign generals, whom he wasn't the commander-in-chief when they were appointed, and he couldn't set a task and be 100% sure that they would deliver the right result. That is, it took some time to change the command staff, to change the top management at the Ministry of Defense. So, for you to understand what you're capable of in your army, several months are needed. That's why all of Trump's conversations were so non-threatening, or something. That is, he couldn't say, well, if Volodya, if not, then we'll wring your neck right now. But how will we wring it? What will we wring it with? Where's the plan? No one had prepared a plan. No one had calculated what would need to be done to deploy the Russian army in this theater of operations. Nobody was doing this. It was just this chaotic supply of things. And I'll tell you frankly, to put it mildly, it wasn't exactly what we needed. The fact that we still have them flying is the fault of the previous command and the U.S. political leadership. They could have helped us solve this problem a long time ago. Is that a problem? No, they helped us so that we wouldn't collapse, and so that, God forbid, we wouldn't defeat the Russian army, because we almost did. More precisely, we should have done it in the fall of 22. And I maintain that we were dragged away from our victory. Our victory was stolen from us. We had the opportunity to defeat the Russian army, not the mobilized one, but the contract one, because we were mobilized, we were morally charged, and we received a sufficient set of weapons to accomplish this task. And when, let's say, America saw that we were about to crush them, they pulled us back. So, instead of encircling this group on the Dnieper, they moved us from the left bank to the right and forced us to assault these 3 airborne forces head-on. There were also several super-trained troops there. There were no weak troops there, no hothouses. So, and we were supposed to go where they weren't. And they weren't there, because I know they weren't there. I flew there to the full tactical depth. There was no defense there. That is, we were supposed to take a different route, not directly through this concrete wall, but encircle them and block them on the right bank of the Dnieper. And if they had managed to escape from there, we would have crushed them in a head-on battle. To ram head-on into a concrete wall, against such a well-prepared defense, would have been suicide. And we were sent to commit this suicide by our command, who must sort it out. How it happened, who made this decision, who forced you to make this decision, which of you is stupid, and which of you is a traitor. Because neither Milley nor Biden are traitors, they didn't swear allegiance to Ukraine. But someone from our group, someone who understood what they were doing, is a traitor, and someone who didn't, is simply as dumb as a tree, and professionally incompetent and should be held accountable for their negligence. Here's an example. This is if we take the Southern Theater of Military Operations in the North. There, too, the question remains open. How the 1st Tank Army managed to escape encirclement. Well, that's the story. So, I believe the Western Allies were making fun of us. That's it. And now Trump will come with completely different intentions. But it takes time to understand, who is in what light and what options he has. We need to review what's available, find competent officers who are truly capable of predicting how the combat situation will develop there in one format or another, right? Basically. As people who know Trump well told me, he never pukes. That is, if he says something is either this or that, then both options are possible. He certainly won't bluff. That's why he bargained with Putin. Well, to put it mildly, Volodya, well, you're a normal person, let's drop this, otherwise this is all wrong, right? That's more or less it. But now everything sounds different. Yeah. Vladimir, you have 2 options. Either you leave voluntarily, or you don't leave voluntarily, stop the fighting, and then have as long as you want to talk about peacetime or military matters. But I forbid you to fight. If you don't agree, your army will be routed on Ukrainian territory. And that possibility already exists. And Trump, I'm absolutely certain, will implement this program if Volodya doesn't listen. Moreover, it's already being implemented. That is, Volodya simply has the ability to suspend it. There is the appropriate set of weapons, there is the appropriate plan, designed to end the war and defeat the Russian army on Ukrainian territory. This won't happen tomorrow. This isn't a matter of one day or even a couple of months, but the process will become irreversible in the spring. I absolutely believe this. And then I'm afraid that neither Ukraine nor the West will agree to the conditions Trump has now put forward, such as a ceasefire. By the way, I forgot, besides military history, yes, it was also necessary to sort things out with the Allies, develop a unified position on this war, what to achieve. Yes, Zelensky was shouting there, I don't want to know anything about the borders of 1991, and kicking around, without having any resources to solve this problem. So, he needed to be somehow pulled into this. That is, a collective decision should have been reached between the West and Ukraine on how to end this war. Option A, Option B. Option A is a ceasefire, and talk to this Putin as much as you want until he dies there, or, by the way, your Vaji changes. Let the next ones talk. That's it, well, something like that. Or, yes, systematic preparations are underway to defeat the Russian army on Ukrainian territory. And the Russian army will be defeated in 2026. Absolutely. I know some details that I cannot disclose because they have not been officially announced by anyone. This is absolutely convincing.
Arty, thank you. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are very pleased. Thank you.
Thank you, yes, for inviting us.
Thank you. Arty Green was our guest today, for which we are extremely grateful. Of course, we are grateful to you. Our sponsor is on the Patreon YouTube platform. Stay tuned.